Now to the Women's World Cup, where there is only 4 teams still standing after a week of victories and, of course, some upsets. The host country, Australia, won in dramatic fashion, taking down France over the weekend in a game that was settled after an epic second round of penalty kicks. England also advancing after beating Colombia. Both teams will face off Wednesday in the semifinals. And tomorrow, Spain and Sweden, they will battle to decide who advances to play in the tournament's final. Pardeep Cattry is joining me now from New York City to discuss this tournament. She's a soccer writer for CBSSports.com. Good morning. Let's start with predictions, Pardeep. So who do you think we'll be seeing in the final?
Oh, man. If I had to take a guess, I would say it might be Sweden versus England, but really it's any team that could really go to the final. They've all played really well so far.
Okay, that's not giving me a good enough answer.
Sorry.
So Australia, we know, going to the next round after a nail-biting penalty shootout with France. What do you want to see there? Like, what do you expect when they face England, especially because there's going to be obviously home court advantage?
Yeah, so I think England is the better team on paper, and I think they actually played a really good game against Colombia when they went down. But like you said, there's the home field advantage for Australia, and they also have available for them their best player, one of the best strikers in the game, Sam Kerr. So I expect them to give England some trouble, but England, I think, are just the more cohesive team. So it's going to be a tough one for sure.
You know, there have been a lot of firsts at this Women's Soccer Cup. Talk about what makes this tournament different than some of the other ones that we've seen in previous years.
What's been so obvious is that between the last tournament and this one, so over the last 4 years, these countries have put so much more money into women's soccer. So it's professionalized the game more. It's given all of these players more resources to everything that makes them great athletes. And you've seen now the gap of the teams at the top closing. But really, every single team I think that was there at this World Cup has just been so much better from the last time out. It's the most competitive edition of this World Cup yet, and hopefully just a sign of what's to come moving forward.
Yeah, I wonder what that says about how this is shaping up in a global sense for women in sport.
Yeah, I think the Women's World Cup is probably the biggest women's sporting event in the world, but we've seen over the course of just the last few years women's sports getting more investment and ultimately attention, right? Like we're talking about soccer here, but if you remember March Madness just earlier this year set all of those viewership records. Like every single women's sports league and women's sports property is just getting a lot more attention, a lot more viewership. People are paying more attention than ever, and you're seeing the money move with that, thankfully. And now it gives these athletes a better chance to go show themselves on these great stages.
And even though we didn't make it as far maybe as many of us would have liked to have in this tournament, Pardeep, I wonder how much the U.S. and the American soccer players have had a hand in moving the sport forward around the world.
Yeah, that was something Alex Morgan actually touched on earlier in the tournament, where she was like, oh, in 2019, the equal pay conversation was just about us, whereas in 2023, it's about every team there. And unfortunately, a lot of these countries are still fighting their federations for equal treatment. Like England, who are the tournament favorites at this point, are still fighting with with the Football Association there over World Cup bonuses. They've paused the fight temporarily to play at the World Cup, but there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. But thankfully, the U.S. has set things in the right direction, and I think everybody is willing to pick that up and find that equal pay that they all deserve. And it's really not just the U.S. There have been trailblazers across the sport, even before this U.S. team. But yeah, I think the conversation really changed when they got started a few years back.
Yeah, really nice to see, and obviously lots to follow there in the tournament this week. Pardeep Cattry, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again.